It's good to be back in the middle of the series about enduring. And tonight I want to talk about something that I've been learning a lot about with the ministry that we do and some different things, but it's this concept called resilience. Everybody say resilience. Who loves that word? Anybody love that word? All right, 4 of you. Here's the thing. I think this is a little bit elusive. I think it's a missing skill. I think the generations that you guys come from, I think this is something that you haven't seen modeled really well in the generation ahead of you. And so a lot of times we expect something from you as a generation that we never showed you what that looks like. Like you guys know I got 2 boys. Half the time I have this expectation of what they're going to do, and then I realize I've never even showed them that, right? We've never even talked about that situation or that moment, and so it's a little difficult to think about that. Now, before we get going too far, everybody realizes it's a pretty big day today, right? A lot going on today. It's actually Nick Jonas's birthday. Kevin Jonas, I blew it. Yeah, he's a sucker for you, right? Okay. There's other big things happening today. And one thing I just want to encourage you guys is this is a moment in our lives that resilience plays out. These are the moments, no matter how things turn out, whether half of the room loves it, half the room doesn't, whatever that situation it may end up being, when circumstances play different than what you expected, these are moments that endurance and perseverance can actually start building character in our lives. And we're going to talk all about that in Scripture today. But I want to tell you a little story, and I wrote half of it out because I want to make sure I hit these points. But about 14 years ago, I was introduced to this story because we actually invited the guy who's the centerpiece of this story to speak at the church I was at in Atlanta. Anybody ever seen the movie? It came out in 2014 called Unbroken. Anybody remember that movie at all? About the Olympic runner who then was in World War II? A guy named Louis Zamperini. This is Louis. He was really old in this time. This was not, at the beginning, but this is at the end of his life. And I want to tell you a little bit about his story. He grew up a Christian, but he was a troublemaker. And to stay out of trouble, his brother started making him run track. And his brother's encouragement genuinely changed his life. So he joined the high school team, and he was from Torrance, California, I believe. And he got the nickname the Torrance Tornado. So he just realized he was quick, became a really fast runner. So his success running made him so successful that he became a part and got selected to the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. All right? Shortly after that, his career quickly ended. So if you remember that was right before World War II, right? Because the Olympics was happening. That's where, I believe it's Jesse Owens had the big thing. If you watched the movie recently, Boys in the Boat, anybody see that? That happened at the same Olympics. So a lot of stuff's going on, and then it quickly got cut short because World War II was in full effect. So he got enlisted, and he went to the Pacific Theater as he was a part of he was a bombardier. So he's on this plane, and this one plane that he was on got shot 500 times on one mission. But they were able to land it, bring it back, but that plane was out of commission. So they just gave him another old plane called the Green Hornet. They get up in the air, they're heading out to do another bombing, and the plane just completely dies. So they end up crashing, and 8 out of 11 the people on the plane died. 3 of them lived, and they lived on this life raft, okay? So if you've seen this movie, you'll understand the story. And this is, I'm getting somewhere with this. But it crashes 850 miles south of Oahu, and it killed 8 of them. So for the next 46 days, say 46 days, he and another guy, because one of the guys ended up not making it, the 2 guys, and it was Phil and Louie, lived on this boat for 46 days in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with nothing around. There was even a time, I think it was around day 18 about like day 30, where there was a plane that came over. They shot a thing up. They had one, they reserved like one of the flares. It goes up. It was a Japanese plane that then turned around and started shooting at them. Could have killed them. Their raft, they ended up having to patch it. But something happened on day 18 where Louis got in the boat was in the middle of a massive storm. Now, at this point in his life, he had been around faith, but it was not central to his life. So he recalls that night, just hanging onto this raft for dear life and saying, God, if you save me, I will give everything I have for your glory. In other words, I will give you all I have. That's not the first time that story or that prayer has been said, right? Probably some of us have said that, like in the middle of an algebra test. Right? We've all had those little moments. Can you imagine, though, 18 days, you've eaten nothing, you don't think you're going to live, you're holding on for dear life, and you're going, God, if you save me, I'll do whatever it takes. 46 days. So that was day 18. And then they were found, unfortunately, by a Japanese boat. So he was thrown in prison, and he met a guy who was in charge of these camps that he was a part of. And the guy's nickname was the Bird, because they said it was a Japanese commander. He was always looking. He was always seeing what's going on. But the Bird took an exception to Louis because he was a good athlete, and because he had something different about him. And he would beat him silly. He would make an example of Louis in front of all the other people. And so there was one point that he'd been beaten so badly that he turned to another POW, and he said, I would rather die than watch someone be tortured like I'm being tortured. That's a pretty bad spot, isn't it? And listen to what the POW said. The only way to beat them would be to make it out of here alive. The only way to win this thing is to make it out of here alive. What that conversation and what that sentence put in the soul of Louis Zamperini was resolve. Was a deep, deep drive to go, you're right. And I will do whatever it takes to get on the other side of this. So one of the most famous parts of the story, I'm going to throw this. This is the cover of the movie film, the poster. But there's a moment where the Bird is so angry at him because they had been, the war was going bad. Louis, they had shifted them to a different camp that was this coal production camp. And in the middle of all this stuff, Louis took a quick break, and the Bird saw it. And so the Bird made him take a beam that was super heavy. He'd been working all day, had no food, whatever. And he made him hold it up, and he said, as long as you can hold this up, I won't beat you. And there's a part in this movie, and I'm telling you, go watch this movie, it's phenomenal, where the Bird's just staring him in the face, and it's like minute 30 that he's still holding this beam above his head. And you just see this resilience, this resolve, this moment of, you are not going to get the best of me. And he just raises this thing up. And it is such a powerful part of the movie. So much so that even the little subtitle is survival, resilience, and redemption. So long story short, Louis ends up getting home, the U.S. wins, but he becomes an alcoholic because of all the stuff he had gone through. And he had gotten his girlfriend pregnant, they got married, they were going to get divorced because he was not in a good place. And he ends up at a Billy Graham evangelism tent. To where he remembers day 18 in the boat. And it changed his life. So much so that he ended up writing letters to the Bird and forgiving him for what he'd done in his life. In that picture, Easton, go back one picture. This was him when the Olympics came to Nagano, and he actually carried the torch right by the place of one of his imprisonments to show a full circle moment of God's goodness and what forgiveness looks like. That's a pretty crazy story, isn't it? What was cool for us is we had him at our church, and we got to meet him. I have the book is called Unbroken by Laura Hildebrand, and he signed it for me, and he was like the sweetest man. He was hilarious. He always wore that Southern California hat. Just an amazing human. When you meet him at that point in his life, you think, oh, this dude's unbelievable. You don't even know the story. But when you hear the resilience of this man to fight for everything good, it makes you want to be different. Now, you ever have those like kind of characteristics or attributes like resilience, or like we say, hey, be empathetic, or have sympathy for like some of those things that are Christian phrases? You're like, man, that's awesome. That's hard for me. I see that in other people. I don't know that that's my wiring. I don't know. Anybody have those kind of things where you're just like, some guy like me gets up here and goes, guys, we should be enduring. And you're like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. Right? Or like, let's be patient. And you're like, patience stinks. Which it does. There's a reason it's a fruit of the Spirit, right? We've talked about that. But enduring does something in us. Enduring, as we're talking about in this series, really matters. because it represents and shows something to a world that doesn't always play that way. I've got a new client I've been working with in Atlanta. They're very successful, and that's taking it lightly financially. And it is some of the most immature human adult people I've ever been around in my entire life. Seriously, you guys welcome, can't wait till you enter the workforce. It's going to be awesome. But I'm telling you right now, there are some pockets of people in that organization that are just different. They have some different attributes. Today, as this election carries out to the conclusion of whatever it's going to be, there's going to be communities of people that handle this way better than other communities, aren't there? And I'm telling you, friends, right now, if there is an attribute I could give your generation and put it so deep in you, it would be this idea of steadfast, persevering, and resolve to be resilient Christian people. Because you're going to stand out in a crowd. You realize that most in your 20s, the average 20 decade, you're going to work in 6 different places? That's crazy, isn't it? But we live in a gig economy. We live in these different spaces where it makes a lot of sense. Well, if I don't like this, I can freelance here, I can grab that job, I can do this thing here. But what gets lost in that is the art of staying. And so sometimes I've seen it carry into relationships. Well, this one's not as good, and oh, there she goes. She kind of hurt my feelings. I'm not trying to make light of it, but I'm telling you, for your generation, this thing we're talking about these 4 weeks could be the best calling card to shifting a stereotype of what your generation's all about. And I'm here for it. So this is a little less intense than being a POW during World War II, when we're talking about resilience. Maybe a little less violent, maybe a little less intense. But we, as followers of Jesus, have day-to-day opportunities to show what perseverance looks like in challenging times. So why does this matter? Who even cares if we're steadfast or not? God does. God does. God sincerely cares because we're carrying on something that really matters to Him. It's this message and it's this hope. And we get a lot of good advice in this book geared around that. So listen, if you have your Bible, you can turn to Romans 5. We're going to jump over to Hebrews 12 in a minute. The last few weeks, Thomas and Chris have been in James 1, so we're going to jump back just a little bit. But listen to what it says in Romans 5, verses 3 through 5. It says this, not only that, but we rejoice in our what? Sufferings. Who rejoices in their sufferings? Anybody in the room? You love it? Love a good suffer? Yeah, all right. That's good. Maybe that maturity actually brings that out in you sometimes. A little bit of life when you realize, man, I grow in these moments. But most of the time, suffering is not my favorite. Anybody with me on that? Yeah? Okay, good. But we rejoice, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces what? Endurance. Just making sure you guys are with me. And endurance produces character, and character produces hope. I remember getting saved in high school, and there was this thing in my mind that really separated Christians from non-Christians, and it was just the simple idea of in hard times, Christians had hope. You ever been around a family member or a friend who got a bad diagnosis, got a job loss, something where they were in a pretty bad situation, and they didn't have anything to lean on towards hope? You ever feel that? For them, in a sense, like, I just want to give you hope. And they're going, yeah, but I'm good. Right? If there's one thing that I believe with all my heart is one of the greatest gifts that God gives us through Jesus, is hope. Tonight, I don't care. I care what happens, but guess what? I have hope in Jesus. I rest in Jesus. I trust in Jesus. I trust in Jesus in our systems. As flawed as they might be, I trust. And no matter what happens even tonight, and no matter what happens in your job, and no matter what happens in that relationship, we can have hope. And I love this because he says, we rejoice in suffering because that produces character. And character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame. Why? Because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. That's pretty powerful, y'all. That was the Southern Tyler coming out, sorry. It's just a faster way of saying you all. Come on, stay with me. Guys, suffering, rejoicing in suffering because it makes us different. It creates character, which then creates hope. Friends, I'm telling you right now, you can spend a lifetime building character and just a few minutes losing it. And if you don't understand that being steadfast and resilient is one of the ways that God helps you avoid falling because of a one-night decision, because of a few-minute decision, because of a bad decision, and erasing years of work, that's what He's doing in us in those moments of learning and of growth. Character is built. It does not just happen. But when and where does this matter? And the question I'd ask you, if this is such a personal thing, why does God even care? If it's just my own little thing, my own little world, my own little process I'm going through, why does this matter to God? Because it's a sign of something bigger. When you're resilient as a follower and people know that you're a Jesus follower, it says something to them. It shows them, wow, there is maybe a different way to look at this life thing that we're walking through. Is that fair? You ever been around somebody in your workplace that had a really tough situation and they came out with flying colors because how they handled the moments? That's when you go, that's unique. That's different. There's something about them. I'm kind of interested in that. Here's the beauty. Let's flip over to Hebrews real quick if you got your Bible. So again, this is just a couple chapters, basically a page over from where Thomas and Chris have been talking from James. You've heard this passage, chapter 12, verses 1 through 7, but listen to how it starts. We just talked about this. If you see somebody in a unique setting and they're witnessing or they're showing their life a little different from what the other people around them are showing, listen to what it says right here, 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. So we're literally all the time, somebody's watching. Not like the bird. You don't want him watching, but other people are watching how we walk through what we walk through. Not only is God doing something in you during that time, but other people are watching. Let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. You've heard this passage before. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So I know there's one of the big fitness trends is, what are those backpacks called? The rucksack or something like that? You know, anybody know what I'm talking about? But like you go walk and you carry like 20 pounds and then a week later you carry like 30 pounds. And nobody works out in here? Great, me either. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's like CrossFit kind of stuff. You wear a backpack. Let me ask you this. If you're running a marathon, do you want to wear a backpack with a bunch of weight? No. You guys know I'm pretty simple, so most of my questions are pretty much like right in front of you. Like that's pretty easy. When you're wearing a backpack with too much weight, it's going to affect how you run. What the writer of Hebrews is telling you right now, friends, is that the race that you're called to run, the example you're called to be, because there's a cloud of witnesses, if you got a bunch of sin in your life, that weight's going to be heavy. You will not be able to run the race that God has for you if there's too much stuff sitting on you. Does that make sense? So if you've got bitterness in your heart towards a friend, a neighbor, a family member, and you cannot let it go, that's going to be a weight in your life. And then God says, hey, I need you to go do this thing. You're going, yeah, but I'm not ready for that. I can't do that. I'm too tired. Or maybe it's a financial thing that you've been kind of skimming the system a little bit, and you know it, and you know it's not right. Or you've been playing in the gray area with whether it's your finances or relationships or what you're looking at on TV, and you're like, yeah, but I haven't crossed the line yet. And God's going, throw off those weights. The sin's not worth it. I got stuff for you. He goes on to say this. Let us run the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, what? Endured the cross. That word just keeps showing up, doesn't it, tonight? His joy was to look and endure something that was the worst possible scenario. That's what we're looking to when we look to endure. And he says, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. I think about Louis Zamperini. If you watch the movie, you will see the number of times that if it was you in the story, you would have grown weary, right? I mean, I can't tell you. There was times he would get beaten, and I'm going, just, wrap it up. Turn it in. Nobody would think anything less of you, because this suffering is too much to even watch. And yet he resolved to stay and persevere and to endure. And that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. And have you forgotten the exhortation? Consider him endured so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. That's just a reference back to what Jesus just did. And you have forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons. My son, daughter, do not regret lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and chastises every son or daughter whom he receives. It is for the discipline that you have to endure. How many of you loved being disciplined by your parents when you were growing up? I always do that question, or I always ask questions like that, and I realize I'm trying to make a point that nobody should like that, and then there's always a few of you that do. So then I'm asking bad questions. That's my fault. But you know what I mean? Like sometimes if we're mature, we're like, yeah, we get that. We're growing in this. And most of the time when it comes to discipline, as a kid, you don't realize it was good until later, right? But in the moments, being disciplined sucks. I don't want an 11 o'clock curfew. I'm really mature. I can handle everything coming to me after 11 o'clock at night. Guys, I'm 48 years old. Guess what? I don't need to be out past 11 o'clock at night. There ain't a lot of good things happening past 11 o'clock at night, except maybe a spaceship launch or a lunar eclipse. I don't know. Those were random. That came to my brain. I don't know what that's all about. It is for discipline that you have to endure, because God is treating you like kids, like a son or daughter. For what son is it that the Father does not discipline? So we got these great cloud of witnesses. We got to throw off this sin. And the reason that we're suffering and the reason that we want to persevere is because God is doing a work in us. I want you to think for a second. There's been a moment in your life where you realize, yeah, as crappy as this is, as terrible as I feel, as frustrated as I am right now, I can go back and recall the fact that God is doing a work in me. I think it was a year ago or so, I preached a message over here on Advent and on waiting. And I told the story of being in probably the hardest persevering, enduring season I've ever gone through and having to fight for resilience in that. And it was Christmas time, and I was driving in St. Louis. This is how you drive. And I was driving in St. Louis, and this Hillsong song came on, Seasons. You guys remember me talking about this at all? And I literally just pulled over to the side. Never heard the song before. I pulled over to the side of the road, just started weeping. The reason is in the bridge, there's a line. And what it says is, God, if you're not done working, then I'm not done waiting. And the whole song, now it's Christmas time, by the way. We've finished Halloween. You can listen, watch movies. You can turn on Christmas lights. I'm totally good with that. So you can go listen to the song and not be the weirdo, okay? But I want you all to listen to the song because it talks about how there's a season for everything. There's a season of growing, and a lot of times those seeds have been planted for a long time before they actually grow, right? But in the bridge, it simply says, God, if you're not done working, then I'm not done waiting. Y'all, that's where resilience comes in. When you resolve to say, God, I don't get it, I'm confused, this is hard, this is frustrating, but if you're not done working, then I resolve to be resilient in this moment and wait on you. You see how that plays out? That's where the character grows. That's where the endurance shows up. That's where you become a man or a woman that can be trustworthy in hard things, and that's what God is doing in our lives. R.C. Sproul says this, We're able to persevere only because God works within us, within our free wills, and because God is at work in us. We are certain to persevere. So in other words, he's saying, the work is being done in us, and it's worth it, even though it's painful. So I thought about what are some of the things that are keeping us from persevering? What are maybe a few obstacles that keep us from stepping into the space of character growth, stepping into the space of enduring appropriately? And the first one is really funny. It's boredom. I think one of the challenges with the younger generations that we are raising right now, and I know you're tired of hearing this, but because of technology, because of phones, because of media being so rampant and so available, our ability to stay focused on anything for any length of a time is really difficult, isn't it? So many of us are going, yeah, well, again, I'm on to the next thing. I already watched that. I checked that. When I watch my kids flip through whatever it is they're flipping through on their phone, I'm amazed at how quickly they're consuming content. And I'm telling you, friends, I'm so glad I didn't have that stuff when I was growing up. I've told you guys stories before of the campus ministry we were involved at. I'm telling you, we saw spiritual awakening for years. We went from 100 down to 75 students praying for a spiritual awakening at the University of Georgia. And by the time I graduated, we had 1,500 every Wednesday night. And that's been going on for 25 years now. But do you remember 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe last year, the Asbury revival thing that happened? It was these 16 days at this college up in Wilmore, Kentucky, where all these people started coming in to watch this because guess what? It was broadcast all over everybody's social media. And people started critiquing these college students going, oh, they're not doing it right. Oh, they're just immature young kids, just, oh, if they would just do it like this, God would do more things. And I remember sitting there going, God, thank you that we didn't freaking have social media when I was in college. Because we had a group of students that believed that God could wreck our lives, and we went after him with all our hearts, and guess what? We did it wrong sometimes. But I'd rather you be aggressive chasing Jesus than never chase him at all. And what I saw was a group of young adults like Annie F. Downs and Kevin Queen and David Platt and myself and some other folks who gathered together on a regular basis, and God sent us out because we weren't distracted, because we stayed focused, and God did work in the character of our lives. I think we lose heart when we get bored. I'm just telling you the reason I think boredom is such a powerful and poignant reality is because it's so rampant in our world. Because you're looking for the next thing, because you're used to it. Everything's the next thing. Friends, I'm telling you, we talked about this in the topic when I talked about rest. What does it look like to stay for a minute? What does it look like to pause for a minute? Please, please, please don't miss what God has in your life in that circumstance because you're bored. Stay. Be resilient. The second one is I think it's hard. I tell the boys all the time, you can do hard things. Your parents ever said that to you, or friends said that to you when you're frustrated or mad or angry or something? You're like, it's okay. We can do hard things. But I think this is a big obstacle for us. And the last one, I think a huge obstacle for us is the unknown. Why am I even staying faithful? Right? Like, is that ever had that moment you're like, it's kind of the idea of, is this even worth the pain? Is this even worth me going through? I guarantee Louis, in the middle of all of those years, no food, freezing to death, there were probably days he's going, is it even worth it? And friends, I bet some of you in this room right now have been going through something long enough that you've asked this very same question is, why am I still fighting? I think that's a fair question. But I think God continues to give us reminders of why. So with the work we do with pastors and for the ministry I started, I've told a lot of you guys about, part of our connection has been researching and finding research around this concept of resilience. So this isn't like something new to me. It's something that's super practical to me. So within 10 years of research, we found 4 key practical ways to be resilient. So you guys know me well enough. I'm a leadership guy. So I want to give you, I don't want this to be like some, cool, okay, great, Hebrews, I need to endure. I want to give you pillars and ways so that you are resilient when the time comes. All right? Is everybody good with that? All right, the first one is this: honest connections. Honest connections. A few months back, maybe it was in the spring, we talked about friendship and connection and how critical that is. Guess what? That hasn't changed since the spring. You don't just get friendship by happenstance. This requires work on your end. How many of you love having friends that don't respond to your text? They're my favorite. There's a few actually I'm okay with, but how many of you love having that friend that never reciprocates friendship? Nobody. That's not friendship. I'm telling you right now, I've got friends that would to this day tell you that I am 90% the initiator. But I'm not going to stop. Just, what's today, Tuesday? Yeah, just yesterday. Texas A&M basketball played UCF and lost. It's unfortunate. Okay, I feel you. But the head coach of Texas A&M has been a friend of mine since he was coaching Jimmy Butler at Marquette. And then he went to Virginia Tech, and now his name's Buzz Williams. Buzz Williams is the head coach of a Division I basketball team. Guess how many friends Buzz gets to hang out with on a regular basis that don't need anything from him? Very few. I'm a friend in Buzz's life where I don't need jack from him except a few swag shirts every now and then. So yesterday morning I went and did chapel. I took the boys. We went and did chapel. We watched shoot around. I don't even need to have a conversation with Buzz. I just want Buzz to know that I'm here for him if he ever needs anything. Because honest connection matters. Open conversation and genuine relationships. This is how you build resilience. Why does this matter when it comes to resilience? Because you need people when things get hard. We don't do well in isolation. You realize that, right? And guess what? When the rubber hits the road, you're going to do worse in isolation. You need community when things get tough. The second one is this. I've talked about this a million times. If you can't tell, there's a few themes in my life, and I like to bring them right back to you. Ongoing growth and learning. Oh, excuse me, back up. Whole person health. You're like, that's not up there. You're right. It's coming. Now you know. I gave away the secrets. Whole person health. We must prioritize emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being to be in it for the long game, for longevity, for resilience. If you're not a whole person, when suffering and hardship and hard things come, it will expose the areas of your life that are not whole. So, for instance, one of my biggest challenges in life is when I travel like I've been traveling lately, whatever diet or exercise regimen I've gotten into goes out the window because I just struggle being disciplined on the road. It's really difficult for me. That's where it gets exposed, right? In those tough seasons when I'm away from my family for different reasons, I feel it in different ways. And those parts of me that aren't fully whole yet can be exposed. So that's why being a whole leader is so important. You guys have been around and probably even not enjoyed it, but there are Christians that you're like, they're super spiritual. Back in the day when I was growing up, they used to say they were so heavenly minded, they were no earthly good. Right? Unfortunately, I think we have a day and age where we have a lot of Christians that are so earthly minded, they're no heavenly good. But what I want you to know is the most effective way you can be for your friends, for your family, for your job, is to be whole and to grow in your mental and spiritual and emotional well-being. Third one is this, I already gave it away, is ongoing growth and learning. I got about 3 weeks left of my second to last class in my PhD work. Come on now, that's serious. Thank you. And when I finish the dissertation, I will only listen or respond to Archbishop. So we're going to go there. I'm just kidding, mostly. We must constantly pursue growth and spiritual growth. Last Monday, before I went out of town, my lifelong leadership coach is a lady named Fran. I think I've talked about her before. She's the one that looks like Edna that makes the suits in Incredibles. Remember that? No joke, but with a Brooklyn accent. Tyla. That's how she says it. Fran just finished her PhD at 72 years old. If that lady doesn't inspire you to realize that ongoing growth and learning make you well enough to handle the persecution and the challenge and the suffering in life, if you're not fighting for growth, you're going the wrong direction. Perseverance, I love this quote from Walter Elliott. This is so good. Everybody listening to me? You with me still? We're almost done. Perseverance is not a long race. It's many short races, one after the other. I'm going to read it to you again. Perseverance is not a long race. It's many short races, one after the other. They tell you sometimes, like, life's a marathon, all this stuff. I love this idea. Don't think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this race for the next 35 years of my life. I got to do the race that's right here, right now, and yet God's going to take me into another space. And the last one is this: there is strength in community. I love that you're here tonight. I love that you keep showing up. The table is community. Your small group is community. Your school is community. There is strength when you go through stuff. One of our staff members, Amy Newsom, just went through a brain surgery because they found what they thought was a tumor, and it ended up being an infection, the very best possible outcome. She does not have cancer. But do you know what she said? I could not imagine going through this without the community that I've just lived through. And her faith, Hebrews 12 faith, her life grew because she was strengthened in community. Friends, that's 4 things that if you can just start putting around your day-to-day disciplines, the way you want to think about life, so that some of you are in great seasons of life, and I'm not the guy that loves to stand up here and go, get ready, it's coming right after this. The shoe's about to drop. But if you live long enough, you realize, man, there are going to be seasons that are great, and there are going to be seasons that aren't. But what if we as the table community would choose to go, God, if you're not done working, I'm not done waiting. I will stay in this space of resilience until you do the character building you want to do, until you move in my life the way you want to move in my life. I realized as I was preparing and praying for this tonight that the last 3 times I've been to the table, every one of them have been specifically built on one main principle. So a few back, I talked about rest. And we can only rest when we trust. Remember that? We can only rest when we trust God. And then the message after that was talking about expectations this fall, great expectation. You can only expect when you trust in God. And friends, I'm here to tell you tonight that we can only endure when we trust that God has something better for us. Listen to what he says in Psalm 9. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. So tonight, as we wrap, I want this to be our prayer. Some of you might read this passage and go, yeah, I'm not sure I don't know his name necessarily. I've never put my trust in him. And my prayer tonight is, if you want to talk to somebody, we have a connection lounge outside. We've got leaders around. Talk to them about this conversation. What does it mean to trust in him? For the rest of us, I would bet there's some part of our life right now that we need to trust in him because he's doing a work in us, and we're frustrated with it. And if we were God and we changed our circumstances, we would do this, that, turn that knob, do this thing, but he hasn't yet. And it makes us a little frustrated, doesn't it? My encouragement tonight is, come talk to God about it. But here's the thing I really think would maybe be music to his ears based on what we've read tonight in his word. What if you come have a conversation with God about the thing or whatever the suffering or whatever the peace is, but in the middle of that conversation you go, hey, but God, I know you're building something in me. I don't know what it is yet. I'm going to be honest. This really hurts and I'm really sad. But do what you need to do. Because on the other side of this, there are people watching how you manage this moment. There are people wondering how you're going to walk through this pain. And friends, tonight, on a really, really important night in our country, how we walk out tomorrow is going to show who we believe in. How we carry out our lives is going to show where our trust is. So my prayer is, if there's sin in your life that's weighting you down from the race that God's calling you to, come get rid of it tonight. Grace is all over this place. We're going to sing a song. It just simply says, I trust in God. So I'm going to pray for us, and then do what you need to do in this time with our Lord. Father, we're thankful for your care. We're thankful for your grace. We're thankful that you care enough about us to put us in positions that we have to choose whether we're going to endure or not. And Lord, in this room tonight, I just pray against these obstacles that can keep us from persevering and being resilient followers of Jesus. I pray, God, against this room, letting boredom shift our growth. I pray, God, that this room will be resolved, that when things get hard, we stay. I just pray, God, that you do the work in our hearts tonight. And as a community, would you strengthen us tonight? God, we just simply say as a group of friends trying to pursue you, we trust you and we love you. Let's worship together.